Managing wealth is complex, but making decisions should be.
Typically what has happened in India is if someone is running a company, they plow 100% of their money back into the company. I think now more and more people are realizing they need to diversify.
When is the right time to even start thinking about family office?
We actually get that quite a bit. So I think there's a...
Hello everyone. Welcome to the Family Office Decision Series by Transformance Forums. I'm your host Kanishka Karkera, and today I'm joined by Mr. Manish Jain, the co-founder at MProfit. Welcome, Mr. Manish. So, Mr. Manish, could you please share your views to our viewers what MProfit does and what's your journey at MProfit?
Hi, my name is Manish Jain. I'm co-founder of MProfit. We started MProfit in 2009, so that's been around 17 years. And we work with thousands of family offices across the country. And the whole reason is because family offices are getting more complex, more investment options, whether it's REITs, InvITs, SGBs, you name it. And of course, multiple family members. And what they're all looking for is a single dashboard to view all the investments. And that's what MProfit delivers, both on the web and the mobile interface.
Great. So without further ado, let's get started with our very first episode for the day. When and why should you start a family office? So Mr. Manish, in your experience, when is the right time to even start thinking about family office? I'm keen to know your thoughts on this.
Thanks. No, it's a great question. So we actually get that quite a bit. It's surprisingly, we have a software product, but we actually get a lot of incoming questions. And this is a very common one. Like, when should we start a family office? And I think it's actually there's actually two pieces to it. One is, people look at a family office, something that you probably see in Europe or the US. So it's very structured, very formal. And I think that concept is slowly coming to India. But I think the bigger thing is when a family or an operational company is looking to diversify and kind of, part of that asset allocation. So typically what has happened in India is if someone is running a company, they plow 100% of their, money back into the company and keep on growing it. But I think now more and more people are realizing they need to diversify. There are more family members coming into the business. So what ends up happening is at that point when they want to kind of say, let's de-risk from the main business and let's set up a family office so we can diversify into whether it's, listed equities or startup investing or real estate. And that's really when they need to start looking at maybe structuring those investments in a formal structure such as a family office.
Speaks volumes. Okay, Mr. Manish. So what are the common triggers? Liquidity, complexity, generational change. I'm keen to know your thoughts.
I would say all three of them, actually. It really depends. There is no one set answer. And, like you mentioned, liquidity, it happens quite a bit. People are, selling part of their company in the open market. So now they're coming into a large amount of money. So they kind of set that aside and say, let's set up a family office. Second is generational change. That is something that I see more and more happening. Younger family members come into the business. They're not so interested in running the operational business. So I think the elders in the family say, okay, why don't you actually run the family office and take it upon you as, learning from, other family offices and setting that up. So that's kind of where we see a common trigger happening.
How would you distinguish between informal setup and building a formal structure? What is your take on this?
Yeah, so that's something we hear quite a bit, and we actually see it very often because when people start using MProfit, we quickly come to know whether it's an informal setup or it's a formal structure. And I'd say the difference really obviously happens quite a bit where, people say, let's just try, and so let's do it informally. And then as they progress, maybe over a couple of quarters, maybe even a couple of years, they kind of realize, maybe we need to formalize it. And a lot of that really based on do they want to put in like KPIs or KRAs? They want to have all these different, ways to manage and also measure the deployment of their funds. So it really is more dependent on the, family, whether their business is actually formalized or it's very informal. And then that also kind of lends to the way they run the family office.
So according to you, what mistakes do usually family makes in the initial years?
So I think there's a couple different mistakes that people usually make. One of the first mistakes I see is when they say, let's set up a family office, they end up over hiring. They get a lot of professionals on board. They get a CIO, they get a bunch of investment analysts, and they try to kind of do a lot of investing. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is there's a tendency to do something because action means something is happening. But that typically, when you look at real long-term investing, sometimes just sitting on your hands is probably the best investment. But they feel like they need to do stuff, so they kind of set up an office, they get a bunch of employees, and that just doesn't seem to work sometimes. So that's one of the first mistakes. Second mistake I see is, the flavor of the month is what they kind of go with. So I'd say in the last 6 or 7 years, everyone has wanted to get into startup investing because they see what's happening. And that also is probably not the right method of just investing in startups left, right, and center. So those are the couple of mistakes that we see happening again and again and again.
Okay. So according to you, 10 years down the line, how will the definition of family office change in India and in the Middle East?
So I think the definition of family office today in India is very informal, even though when I say that there is a difference between informal and a structured format, even in a structured format, I still think it's very different than when you see a family office. Let's say, I'd say the real standard is Swiss family offices. They are there for generations, and they've had many, many years and many generations to kind of set that up. And I think that's the high bar. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see many more kind of move towards that, where, you see, even the US is still not as structured as what you would see in Switzerland. But of course, US is definitely there in terms of it. But I think in India, it's definitely going to happen. And I wouldn't say that it's not happening today. There are, I'd say maybe the top 1% of the family offices in India are structured as what you would see in Europe and the US. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see more and more, maybe 10%, 15% get to that level.
Okay, great. Great to know that.
So is that a wrap on episode 1?
All right. So that sums up our first episode.